They threw him in with the wild alien girl. When they returned, she was sleeping in his arms. The cell door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Adrian hit the floor hard. His shoulder took the impact, years of training turning the fall into a roll that brought him to his feet. The door sealed behind him with a finality that rang through his bones. Blood, old and new. The copper tang saturated the air, thick enough to taste. His eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, and the floor came into focus. Scattered bones, some still bearing scraps of flesh. Claw marks scored the metal walls in frantic patterns, deep enough that whatever made them had been trying to dig through solid steel. The guard's laughter echoed through the speaker system. 3 minutes, one said in the reptilian language Adrian had learned during interrogation. I give the human 3 minutes. Generous, I say 2. Adrian's pulse kicked up despite his training. He scanned the cell, 12 feet by 12 feet, no windows, one door, no weapons. And in the corner where shadow pooled deepest, 2 eyes caught the light, yellow-green, luminescent, unblinking. She moved like liquid violence, one moment crouched in darkness, the next airborne, claws extended, fangs bared in a snarl that raised every hair on his neck. Adrian dropped, muscle memory overriding thought. Her body passed inches overhead. He felt the displacement of air, smelled something wild and electric on her skin. She landed where he'd stood, spun, and he got his first real look at her. The intelligence briefings hadn't prepared him. They'd called her species Velkari, described them as aggressive, unstable, prone to berserker rage. They hadn't mentioned she'd be beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, terrible and magnetic and impossible to look away from. Lean muscle moved under skin that seemed to shift between gray and green in the inconsistent light. Her hair fell wild around pointed ears, and those eyes tracked him with predatory focus that made his hindbrain scream to run. She circled left. He pivoted right, keeping distance between them. His breathing remained controlled, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, the rhythm they'd drilled into him during hostile interrogation training. Her nostrils flared, and something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. She lunged again, testing. He sidestepped, didn't raise his hands to fight back. Her claws whistled past his ribs close enough to part his shirt. She recovered instantly, spun low, and he vaulted over the leg sweep that would have shattered his knee. The guards were shouting now, excited, bets being called and raised. Adrian's mind raced through everything he knew about apex predators. They responded to fear. The chemical signature of prey triggered their killing instinct. Running activated their chase drive. Fighting back established you as either rival or food, both targets. But what happened if you were neither? She feinted left, committed right. He moved with her, not away from her, closing the angle instead of widening it. Her claws stopped an inch from his throat. This close, he saw the fine patterns in her iris, the way her pupils dilated and contracted as she processed what he'd done. Her hand trembled. The tendons in her forearms stood out like cables as she fought against her own biology. Instinct demanding she complete the kill, something else making her hesitate. Adrian held her gaze, not challenging, not submitting, just present. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his breathing stayed even, and he knew she could hear it, could probably feel his pulse through the air between them. Easy, he said quietly. The word didn't matter, she probably didn't speak his language, but the tone did. Low, steady, the same voice he'd used to calm a panicked teammate in a hot extraction. Easy. Her ears flicked back, then forward. The snarl faded from her lips. Her claws retracted slowly, and she backed up 2 steps, 3, head tilted like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Adrian moved carefully to the wall farthest from her and sat back against the cold metal. Vulnerable posture, but calculated. He kept his hands visible, relaxed on his knees. Every instinct screamed at him to stay on his feet, stay ready, but predators only attacked what acted like prey. She paced, long strides that ate up the small space, her tail, he hadn't noticed the tail before, lashing behind her. Energy radiated off her in waves. She'd circle close and he'd feel the heat of her body, then she'd veer away like she'd hit an invisible barrier. Minutes passed. His legs started to ache from holding still. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Her breathing came fast, almost panting. Sweat dampened the fine hair along her collarbone. He started talking. Didn't matter what. He told her about the last sunrise he'd seen on Earth, the way the light caught on morning dew in the grass outside his temporary barracks. His voice stayed low and rhythmic, each word spaced with his controlled breathing. Her pacing slowed. The tension in her shoulders unwound by degrees so small he almost missed them. When she finally stopped moving, she stood in the middle of the cell, swaying slightly. Her hands opened and closed at her sides. The fury that had animated her drained away like someone had opened a valve, and what remained looked almost fragile. She dropped to her knees, caught herself with her palms on the floor, and the sound she made was something between a growl and a sob. Adrian's chest tightened. Whatever they'd done to her, whoever she'd killed, it hadn't been her choice. Not really. He could see it in the way she curled into herself now, in the tremors running through her frame. He shifted his weight forward slightly, testing. She didn't react. Moving with the same careful deliberation he'd used to defuse an explosive, he extended his right hand, not reaching for her, just offering. Palm up, fingers relaxed. She stared at his hand like it was a foreign object. Her lips pulled back from her teeth, not quite a snarl, more a grimace, but she didn't attack. The observation window slid open with a scrape of metal on metal. Adrian didn't look away from her, but he heard the sharp intake of breath from whoever stood beyond the reinforced glass. How is he alive? The voice spoke the reptilian language, but the disbelief was universal. Look at her. A different voice, tinged with something that might have been awe. She's not in fury. She's coherent. Heavy footsteps approached. Adrian recognized the measured tread. Someone important. The speaker crackled to life again, and this voice carried authority that made the others fall silent. Fascinating, Commander Vastic said. 3 prisoners, 4 guards, all dead within hours of introduction, but the human sits and she kneels. Sir, we should terminate them both. This is exactly what we needed, Vastic interrupted. The Velkari are winning this war because their warriors are unstoppable in battle fury, but they lose as many allies as enemies because they can't be controlled. A pause, waited with consideration. Until now. Adrian's stomach dropped. He'd survived the immediate threat, but he'd just made himself valuable. In his experience, being valuable to the enemy was often worse than being dead. Keep them alive, Vastic ordered. Improve their conditions. I want to see if this is repeatable. The speaker clicked off, the window sealed, and in the silence that followed, Kyra lifted her head. Her eyes met his across the 3 feet of blood-stained floor between them, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe? Or just shared understanding that they'd both become prisoners in a new kind of cell. She moved closer, not touching, but near enough that he could count each breath she took. Near enough that when she finally settled against the wall beside him, their shoulders almost brushed. The guards would return in the morning. They'd start whatever experiment Vastic had planned. But for now, in this moment, Adrian had done what no one else had managed. He'd reached the warrior in the darkness and brought her back to herself. Her breathing gradually matched his rhythm, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Outside the cell, he heard the guards arguing about who'd won the bet. Inside, Kira shifted incrementally closer, and Adrian knew with absolute certainty that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. Adrian woke to find her watching him from across the cell. Daylight, or whatever passed for it in the station's artificial cycle, filtered through the observation window. She sat with her back against the far wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. The predatory tension from last night had shifted into something else. Wariness, maybe, or assessment. The bones were gone, pushed into neat piles in the corners like she'd spent her sleepless hours cleaning. A slot opened in the wall with a mechanical whir. 2 metal trays slid through. Actual food, not the nutrient paste he'd been choking down since capture. Adrian reached for the nearest tray, then slid it across the floor toward her instead. Her eyes tracked the movement, then lifted to his face. She moved, fluid and quick, snatched the tray, and retreated to her corner. She ate like someone who'd been starved, but her gaze never left him. The observation window opened. She was on her feet instantly, lips peeled back in a snarl. The transformation was instantaneous, from wary coexistence to lethal threat in a heartbeat. "Stand down," a guard's voice crackled through the speaker. "We're taking the human." She positioned herself between him and the door, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, claws fully extended. "It's okay," Adrian said, keeping his voice level. The door opened. 3 guards in full tactical gear, weapons trained on her. She launched herself at them with a roar that made Adrian's ears ring. The lead guard fired, some kind of sonic weapon that caught her mid-leap and slammed her into the wall. She hit hard enough to dent the metal and dropped, convulsing. Adrian moved toward her reflexively, but 2 guards grabbed his arms and hauled him backward. The sounds she made were worse than her battle cry, broken, agonized. They dragged him through corridors to Commander Vastik's office. The reptilian sat behind a desk, scaled hands folded on the surface. "Leave us," Vastik said. The guards obeyed. "You're curious," Adrian said. "The Velkari have been our enemies for 3 cycles," Vastik replied. "Their warriors are unstoppable in combat, but they cannot distinguish between targets. They kill until killed." He leaned forward. "Your species possesses psychological resilience, rational thought under extreme stress. I want you to prove what happened last night wasn't an anomaly." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" "Then you both die. Her, eventually. The drugs we use to maintain her aggression will burn out her system within a month. You, immediately." Adrian met the reptilian's gaze. The calculus was simple. Cooperate and live, resist and die. "I need concessions," Adrian said. "Stop drugging her. Better conditions, and I need to know what you've done to her." Vastik activated a holographic display. The Velkari military court-martialed her 6 months ago for refusing a direct order to sterilize a human colony. We intercepted the transport and claimed her as prisoner. The drugs enhance what already exists in her biology. Now you will restore her inhibitions. When this is over, you let us both go. When this is over, human, you'll be too valuable to release, but you'll be alive." The guards returned and escorted him back. She was conscious again, huddled in the corner, shaking. The moment the door sealed, she looked up at him with something uncomfortably close to relief. Adrian crossed to her slowly. "Can you understand me?" She stared at him, then haltingly she nodded once. "They want me to train you, help you control the rage. Are you willing to try?" She reached out and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Permission, maybe, or trust. The cell transformed over the next day. Actual bunks appeared, a hygiene station installed in one corner. Adrian started simple, breathing exercises. He'd sit cross-legged and demonstrate, slow inhale, hold, slower exhale. She mimicked him, but her breaths came too fast. He placed his hand on his chest so she could watch the rise and fall. She placed her own hand over her heart, then tried again. Better this time. They spent hours on breathing, then controlled movements that required her to maintain rhythm. She learned faster than he'd anticipated. On the 3rd day, she spoke. "Name." Her voice scraped like gravel. Adrian looked up. "Adrian," he said. She repeated it, testing the syllables. "And you?" Progress came in increments. She started sleeping when he slept, her breathing syncing with his. When they sparred, slow, controlled exchanges, her claws stopped inches from his skin every time. On the 7th day, Vastik's voice crackled through the speaker. Demonstration time. Guards brought in equipment, monitoring devices, an aerosol dispersal system. Kyra went rigid. The guards retreated. The door sealed. The aerosol system activated with a hiss, and Kyra's pupils blew wide. She fought it. But whatever they'd pumped into the air was designed specifically to override Velkari inhibitions. Her lips pulled back from her fangs. "Kyra." Adrian stayed where he was, hands visible. "Listen to my voice." She lunged. He sidestepped, turned to face her as she spun for another attack. 4 counts in," he said. 4 counts out, remember?" She caught him by the throat, claws piercing skin. Blood ran hot down his neck. Her face was inches from his, fangs bared. He brought his hand up slowly and placed it on her face, palm against her cheek, thumb near her ear. "I'm here," he said, voice strained. "Come back." Her whole body shook. The pressure on his throat increased. Another few seconds and she'd crush his windpipe. But her eyes were fighting their way back to awareness. "Breathe with me," he managed. "In, out." His vision started to gray at the edges. Then the pressure released all at once, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping. She went down with him, her claws still in his shoulders now, and the sound she made was that same broken sob from their first night. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, ignored the blood soaking his shirt, and counted breaths until they both stopped shaking. That night she didn't return to her own bunk. She curled up next to him, her back to his chest, his arm draped over her waist. His hand rested just below her heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. Neither of them spoke. Something had shifted between them that went beyond training or survival. She relaxed into him, made a small sound of contentment when he unconsciously tightened his hold. Outside, space stretched infinite and cold. Inside they were warm and alive, and together. The wound on Adrian's neck had scabbed over, 4 precise punctures that pulled when he turned his head. Kyra touched them sometimes when she thought he was sleeping, her claws retracted, fingers gentle as she traced the marks she'd left. Vastic increased the demonstrations. Every few days, guards would arrive with new stimulants, new scenarios designed to trigger her fury. Each time, Adrian brought her back. Each time, it required more of both of them. She sat in his lap now during the sessions, his arms wrapped around her middle, his mouth near her ear as he talked her down from whatever chemical rage they'd induced. Her claws would dig into his forearms, drawing blood, but she never went for his throat again. The contact became familiar, necessary even, her body learning to associate his touch with safety instead of threat. The nights changed too. She'd press against him on the narrow bunk, seeking heat or comfort, or something neither of them had words for. Adrian would wake with her hair tickling his nose, her breath warm against his collarbone, and find himself reluctant to move. On the 14th day, she spoke more than single words. "Why you help me?" They were sitting against the wall after a particularly brutal demonstration. His shirt was soaked with sweat and blood, his and hers both. She tucked herself against his side, her head on his shoulder. "Because they gave me a choice between helping you and dying," he said honestly. "But that's not why anymore." She lifted her head to look at him. "Why now?" "Because you refused to kill innocents and they punished you for it. Because you've been fighting their drugs and their torture, and you're still here. Because—" he stopped, unsure how to articulate what he felt. "Because you deserve better than being their weapon." Her hand found his, claws carefully retracted. She laced their fingers together, studying the contrast between her gray-green skin and his tan. "I was soldier," she said haltingly. "Good soldier, win many battle, then they order cleanse colony. I go, see children, human children, same as Valkyrie children, play, laugh, afraid." Her grip tightened. "I tell Commander no, he say is order, I say is murder." "So they court-martialed you?" "My father," she said quietly, "he court-martial me, say I bring shame, Valkyrie warrior not refuse order." Adrian's chest constricted. "Your father?" "Commander Warwick, high caste. He choose duty over daughter." She pulled her hand free and wrapped her arms around herself. "He right. Valkyrie way is battle, is victory, not mercy." "He was wrong," Adrian said firmly. "You saw children and chose to protect them. That's not weakness. That's strength most soldiers never find." She looked at him with those luminous eyes, and something shifted in her expression. Before he could process it, she moved, straddled his lap, hands on either side of his head against the wall. The position put them eye level, her face inches from his. "You believe that?" Her breath ghosted across his lips. "Yes." She kissed him, tentative at first, testing, her fangs careful against his lower lip. Adrian's hands found her waist, and he kissed her back, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. She didn't retreat. She made a sound low in her throat and deepened the kiss, her tongue sliding against his. Heat flooded through him. His fingers tightened on her hips, and she rolled against him in response. The thin fabric of their prison clothes did nothing to hide her body's reaction or his. She broke the kiss, breathing hard, her pupils wide. "Adrian," she said, and his name in her rough voice went straight through him. "Yeah," he managed. "I want." She struggled with the words, then gave up and kissed him again. Her hands moved to his shirt, claws slicing through the fabric like it was paper. He helped her remove the shredded remains, then reached for the fastenings on hers. She caught his wrists, held them. "You sure?" He looked at her, this fierce, damaged warrior who'd been tortured and drugged and broken, who was trusting him with something more vulnerable than her fury. "I'm sure." She released his wrists. He removed her shirt carefully, mindful of old scars that crossed her ribs and shoulders. Battle wounds, most of them, but some looked like they'd come from restraints. She watched his face as he catalogued each mark, her expression guarded. Adrian leaned forward and pressed his lips to a particularly brutal scar on her collarbone. She inhaled sharply. He kissed another scar, then another, working his way across her skin while her breathing quickened and her claws pricked his shoulders. "You're beautiful," he said against her sternum, and she laughed. A startled, almost broken sound. "Liar. Truth," he pulled back to look at her. "Every part of you." She kissed him again, harder this time, less careful. Her hips rocked against him, and Adrian groaned into her mouth. His hands slid up her back, feeling muscle and bone in the slight roughness of her skin. She was heat and strength and want, and he was drowning in her. They moved together with increasing urgency. Clothes disappeared. Kira's claws left new marks on his shoulders and back, but Adrian barely felt them. He was too focused on the sounds she made, the way she moved above him, the grip of her body around his. She bit his shoulder when she came, fangs breaking skin and the sharp pain mixed with pleasure until he couldn't separate them. Adrian followed her over the edge, his hands bruising tight on her hips, her name torn from his throat. They collapsed together, tangled and breathing hard. Kyra licked the blood from his shoulder with surprising tenderness, then curled against his chest. Adrian wrapped his arms around her and tried to remember the last time he'd felt this settled in his own skin. The observation window remained closed. If Vastic was watching, he'd given them this privacy at least. "Tell me about you," Kyra said after their breathing had calmed. "Before soldier, before war." Adrian stroked her hair, careful of her ears. "Nothing interesting. Standard childhood, standard education. Joined the military because I was good at it. A sister, back on Earth. Haven't seen her in 3 years. He paused. "You said your father was Commander Warwick. Any other family?" "Mother dead in battle, honorable death." Her tone suggested she didn't entirely agree with that assessment. "2 brothers, younger. They choose father over me, is Velkari way." "I'm sorry." She shrugged, but the gesture lacked conviction. "You lose family to war. I lose family to choice. Same result." "Not the same," Adrian said. "Your family chose to abandon you. Mine doesn't know I'm alive. That's different." She considered this, then nodded against his chest. They lay in silence for a while, and Adrian thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she spoke again. "What happened when Vastic finished his experiment?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Adrian didn't have a good answer. Vastic had made it clear they wouldn't be released. Best case scenario, they'd spend the rest of their lives as test subjects. Worst case, they'd be separated. Adrian used to train other handlers, Kyra paired with someone else. "We'll figure something out," he said. "Liar," she said again, but without heat. "Optimist." She huffed a laugh. "Same thing in war." "Maybe." He tightened his arms around her. "But I didn't survive this long by giving up. Neither did you." She lifted her head to look at him, and whatever she saw in his face made her expression soften. She kissed him again, slower this time, thorough. When she pulled back, her eyes held something that made his breath catch. "If we die," she said quietly, "I glad at you." "We're not going to die," Adrian said, wishing he believed it. Kyra settled back against him with a sound that might have been agreement or skepticism. Outside their cell, the station hummed with activity. Guards changing shifts, other prisoners being moved, the constant background noise of captivity. Inside, they held each other and pretended the walls weren't closing in. The explosion shook the cell hard enough to knock them both off the bunk. Adrian hit the floor in a crouch, instincts flaring. Kyra landed on all fours beside him, head swiveling toward the door. Another explosion, closer this time, and the lights flickered before emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Running footsteps pounded past their cell, guards shouting in the reptilian language, weapons fire crackling in the distance. "What happening?" Kira's ears were flat against her skull, her whole body coiled tight. Adrian moved to the observation window. Through the reinforced glass, he could see guards running toward the command section. One stopped, spoke frantically into a comm unit, then sprinted away. In the brief moment of clarity, Adrian caught sight of something through the far viewport. Ships. Sleek, predatory vessels that he recognized from intelligence briefings. "Valkyrie," he said, "your people are attacking the station." Kyra was beside him instantly, pressing close to the window. Her breath fogged the glass as she stared at the ships. Something complicated crossed her face. Hope, fear, longing all tangled together. The cell door lost power. It slid open with a grinding sound, leaving them staring at empty corridor. They looked at each other. The same understanding passed between them. This was their chance, maybe their only chance. "Together," Kira said. "Together," Adrian agreed. She took point, moving with lethal grace through the damaged corridors. Adrian followed, his body falling into the tactical rhythm he'd honed over years of operations. They worked in sync without needing to communicate. She'd pause at corners, he'd cover high while she checked low. They'd advance in coordinated bursts. The first guards they encountered were focused on sealing a breach. Kyra hit them like a storm, fast, brutal, efficient. Adrian provided support, taking the one who tried to flank her. The fight lasted seconds. Adrian retrieved a weapon from the fallen guard, checked the charge. Half full, better than nothing. They moved deeper into the station. More bodies appeared, some reptilian, some Valkyrie. The attackers were pushing hard toward the command center. Adrian's mind raced through possibilities. If Kyra's people breached the station, they'd be looking for prisoners, intelligence, anything valuable. They rounded a corner and stopped. A dozen human prisoners knelt in a cargo bay, hands bound, guards standing over them with weapons raised. One guard was shouting into a comm unit, something about hostages, leverage, negotiations. Kyra's whole body went rigid. Her breathing changed, quickened. Adrian felt the shift in her before he saw it, the way her muscles bunched, the low growl building in her chest. "Kyra," he said quietly, "we need a plan." She wasn't listening. Her pupils had blown wide and her lips pulled back from her fangs. The guards hadn't seen them yet, too focused on their prisoners, but that would change the moment Kyra moved. And she was about to move. "Kyra, wait." She launched herself forward with a roar that echoed off the metal walls. The guards spun, but she was already among them. Claws ripped through armor. Fangs found throats. She moved like something primal and unstoppable, and the guards didn't stand a chance. Adrian swore and followed, weapon raised. He took down the guard reaching for an alarm, then the one trying to execute a prisoner. But Kyra wasn't stopping. She'd killed the immediate threats and was advancing on the remaining guards, the ones who'd thrown down their weapons and were backing away with hands raised. She was in full fury now, the rage they'd been controlling unleashed completely. She didn't see surrender. She only saw threats. "Kyra!" Adrian got between her and the guards. She snarled at him, claws raised, didn't recognize him. "Kyra, stop!" She swung. He dropped under it, came up inside her guard, and caught her face in his hands. Her claws dug into his sides, piercing deep, but he held on. "4 counts in," he said, his voice cutting through her growls. "Come on, 4 counts in, 4 counts out." She fought him, trying to shake free, trying to get past him to the guards. Blood ran hot down Adrian's sides where her claws had entered. His vision swam, but he didn't let go. "Look at me," he commanded. "Kyra, look at me." Her eyes found his. For a heartbeat, there was nothing there but fury. Then something flickered, recognition trying to surface through the rage. "Breathe with me," Adrian said. "In, out, you know this. We've done this. In, out." Her breathing was ragged, but it started to slow. The tension in her body remained, every muscle still coiled to kill, but she wasn't attacking. Yet. "That's it," he said softer now. "Come back, I've got you. Come back to me." The prisoners were scrambling to their feet, freed by the chaos. The surviving guards had fled. Combat sounds echoed from deeper in the station. The Valkyrie were close now. But in this moment, all that mattered was the woman in his arms and bringing her back from the edge. Kyra shuddered. Her claws retracted from his sides, and he nearly collapsed from the pain. She caught him, and the fury drained from her face, replaced by horror as she saw what she'd done. "I'm okay," he lied. Blood soaked his shirt, but nothing felt severed, painful but survivable. The far door burst open. Valkyrie warriors poured through in full combat armor, weapons raised. They took in the scene, dead guards, freed prisoners, Kyra covered in blood, Adrian bleeding in her arms. One warrior stepped forward, removing his helmet. He was older, scarred, with the same luminous eyes as Kyra. His face went through several expressions before settling on something between shock and fury. "Kyra," Commander Warwick said in the Valkyrie language, "daughter." She stood slowly, positioning herself between Adrian and her father. Her stance was defensive, protective. "Father." Warwick's eyes moved to Adrian, and his expression hardened. "Step away from the human." "No. That's an order, warrior." "I'm not your warrior anymore," Kira said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You make sure of that." Warwick's jaw tightened. "We came for you. Intelligence said the reptilians had a high-value prisoner. We didn't know it was you until we breached their systems." He gestured sharply. "Come, we're evacuating." "He come too." "The human stays, then I stay." Silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of combat. Warwick stared at his daughter, and Adrian could see the war playing out across his face. Duty versus blood, tradition versus the evidence in front of him. "He's why you're coherent," Warwick said finally. It wasn't a question. "He saved me," Kyra said simply. "When you give me to reptilians to die, he saved me." "We didn't." Warwick stopped, seemed to reconsider. "We thought you were executed. The transport showed no survivors." "You not look hard," Kyra said, and the pain in her voice cut deeper than any claw. More explosions rocked the station. Warwick glanced back at his warriors, then at Adrian bleeding against Kira's side. "If he comes, it's as your responsibility," Warwick said. "Your mate, your consequence." Kyra's ears went back. "He my mate?" Adrian's head swam from blood loss, but he registered that. Mate? The word carried weight in Valkyrie culture from what little he knew. Permanence, claim, choice. "Then move," Warwick commanded. "Both of you, before this station tears itself apart." They ran. Kira supported Adrian, her strength compensating for his stumbling steps. The Valkyrie warriors surrounded them, providing cover as they fought through corridors toward the breach point. Adrian fired when he could, taking down guards who appeared from side passages, but mostly he focused on staying conscious. The evacuation ship waited in a docking bay, its engines hot. They piled in, warriors, freed prisoners, Adrian and Kyra. The moment the doors sealed, the ship launched, and the station fell away behind them. Adrian collapsed onto a bench, his sides screaming. Kyra was there instantly, her hands gentle as she examined the wounds. A medic approached, but she snarled at them until they backed off. "I do it," she said. Her claws had gone deep but clean. She packed the wounds with materials from a med kit, her touch careful despite the blood coating her hands. When she finished, she looked at him with eyes that held too much: guilt, fear, relief. "I hurt you," she whispered. "You came back," Adrian said. "That's what matters." Across the ship, Warwick watched them with an expression Adrian couldn't read. The other warriors were doing the same, whispering among themselves. Adrian didn't need to understand their language to know what they were saying. Their decorated warrior had chosen a human over her own people. Kyra pressed her forehead against his, and Adrian closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion take him. They were alive. They were together. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. The neutral station was called Threshold, appropriate for a place that existed between territories, between wars, between what was and what might be. Adrian stood at the viewport in their assigned quarters, watching ships from a dozen species dock and depart in careful choreography. 3 days since the rescue, and the bruises on his sides had faded to purple and yellow. Kyra was gone. summoned by the Velkari delegation an hour ago, leaving him alone for the first time since they'd met. The quarters were comfortable by station standards: actual furniture, private facilities, a viewport that showed something other than metal walls. But they were still prisoners, just in a nicer cage. The door opened. Adrian turned, expecting Kyra. Instead, Officer Brooks walked in, wearing civilian clothes that didn't quite hide his military bearing. Adrian Cole, Brooks said, studying him. Officially listed as killed in action 3 weeks ago. Quite a surprise to find you very much alive. Brooks. Adrian recognized him from briefings years ago. Intelligence Division, Recruitment Section. How did you find me? We maintain contacts on Threshold. When a human appeared on a Velkari ship, flags went up. Brooks moved to the small table and sat, gesturing for Adrian to join him. I've read the reports. What happened in that cell is unprecedented. Adrian remained standing. What do you want? To debrief you, to understand what you've learned about Velkari biology and psychology, to offer you a way home. Brooks leaned back. You're a valuable asset, Cole. The information you possess could change how we approach this war. I'm not interested in being debriefed. Even if it means saving human lives, your techniques for managing Velkari rage could be taught, replicated. We could establish programs. You want to turn people into handlers, Adrian interrupted. Pair humans with Velkari warriors like their weapons systems. I've seen that play before. It doesn't end well. Brooks's expression didn't change. The war is stalemated. Casualties mount daily. What you've discovered could break that stalemate without additional bloodshed. By creating new kinds of prisoners, thanks but no. Then what? Brooks stood, his tone sharpening. Stay here with her? You realize the Velkari delegation wants the same thing we do, to study what happened, replicate it, weaponize it. At least if you come with us, you'd have autonomy. I'd be alone, Adrian said quietly. That's not autonomy. Brooks studied him for a long moment. You're choosing her over your own species. I'm choosing freedom over being used. Adrian met his eyes, for both of us. Romantic, also naive. Brooks moved toward the door, then paused. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, we extract our people from Threshold, and you'll have missed your window. Think carefully, Cole. There aren't many places in this galaxy for people who belong nowhere. The door closed behind him. Adrian stood alone in the quiet, Brooks's words echoing in his head. He wasn't wrong. Choosing to stay with Kyra meant exile from humanity. No home, no unit, no purpose beyond survival. But going back meant leaving her, and that option felt like cutting off a limb. The door opened again. This time it was Kira, and one look at her face told him the Velkari delegation had said similar things. They want me back, she said without preamble. Full reinstatement, rank restored. They want you too, want to study how human calm Velkari fury. Create program, pair warriors with handlers. She moved to him, her hands finding his. My father commanded, say is duty. Say I owe this to my people. What did you tell them? I tell them I think about it. She looked up at him, and her eyes held exhaustion that went bone deep. They right, Adrian. How many lives we save if we do this? How many warriors stay controlled in battle? How many colonies not destroyed? Adrian cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheek. How many pairs would end up like we were? Locked in cells, drugged, experimented on? Because that's what would happen. They'd study us like specimens until they figured out the formula. Then they'd mass produce it without caring about the people involved. Maybe not. Maybe we make rules, ensure treatment. You don't believe that any more than I do. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. No, I not believe it. They stood like that for several heartbeats, the weight of duty and desire pressing down on them both. Finally, Kyra opened her eyes. What we do, she asked. Leave, Adrian said. Both delegations want us, which means neither can claim us. We slip away before they decide to force the issue, find somewhere in the margins and disappear. Where we go, how we live. I don't know yet, but I'm good at tactics and you're good at violence. There's always work for people with those skills in places like Threshold. He pulled her closer. We figure it out together, like everything else. She kissed him, fierce and claiming, her fangs careful against his lip. When she pulled back, something had settled in her expression. Decision made. Together, she agreed. They spent the next hours planning. Adrian used contacts from his Black Ops days to arrange transport off-station. Kyra traded information about reptilian operations for currency and supplies. By the time both delegations realized what they were doing, they'd already be gone. Night cycle fell across the station. They lay tangled together on the narrow bed, neither sleeping. Adrian traced patterns on Kira's back, feeling the raised lines of scars under his fingers. She purred, an actual purr that rumbled through her chest, and pressed closer. "You regret?" she asked quietly. "Leave your people for me." "No," Adrian said, and meant it. "My people would have debriefed me, given me a new assignment, sent me back to war. This is the first time I've chosen something for myself in years." "Same," she murmured. "Always duty, always orders, then you first time I choose." "We're choosing each other," Adrian corrected. She lifted her head, studying his face in the dim light. "Mate," she said, the word deliberate. "In Velkari culture is permanent, is bond that not break. You understand?" "I understand." "You sure? Once claim, cannot unclaim. My people would see you as mine, your people would see me as yours. No going back." Adrian pulled her up so they were face to face. "I've been yours since you didn't kill me in that cell. This just makes it official." She kissed him again, and it turned into more, slow and thorough, both of them savoring the certainty of choice freely made. They moved together with practiced familiarity now, knowing exactly how to draw sounds from each other, where to touch, how to push and pull, until they were both gasping. When they finished, Kyra bit his shoulder again, reopening the mark she'd left before. Claiming. Adrian didn't mind. Morning brought their departure. A small transport registered to a freight company that asked no questions. They boarded with minimal luggage and maximum caution, but no one stopped them. Both delegations were too busy arguing with each other to notice two prisoners slipping away. The transport launched, and Threshold fell away behind them. Adrian watched it shrink in the viewport until it was just another point of light among millions. "Where to?" the pilot asked over the comm. Adrian looked at Kira. She looked back and slowly smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, fangs and all. "Anywhere," Adrian told the pilot. "Somewhere with work and no questions." The pilot grunted acknowledgement. The ship's engines hummed as they accelerated away from civilized space toward the frontier territories where laws were negotiable and backgrounds didn't matter. 3 days later, station security on Threshold made their rounds through the diplomatic quarters. They approached the room that had housed the unusual pair. The human and the Velkari warrior who'd caused so much fuss among the delegations. The guards entered cautiously, expecting something. Conflict, perhaps, or evidence of the violence everyone seemed to think was inevitable when predator and prey shared space. Instead, they found an empty room, minimal belongings left behind, no signs of struggle. On the small table, someone had left a handwritten note, "Thank you for the hospitality." The guards looked at each other, shrugged, and moved on. Just another pair of refugees disappearing into the vast galaxy, barely worth mentioning in their reports. But if they'd looked closer at the rumpled bed, they might have noticed something. If they'd understood what they were seeing, they might have realized its significance. 2 people had slept there, tangled together, peacefully. A warrior who'd killed dozens without hesitation, and a soldier trained for lethal efficiency, both trusting each other enough to be vulnerable, both choosing each other over duty, over species, over everything else. It was unprecedented, impossible. And somewhere in the frontier darkness, in a region where borders blurred and rules bent, they were doing it anyway.